Welcome again, dear student. I am Dr. Kaleem Ahmed, Assistant Professor, Department of Wildlife Sciences, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. Now, in today's lecture, we are going to learn and discuss a very important topic, that is Biological Diversity Act of 2002. This act is very important for the conservation of Indian biological resources, or we can say for conservation of the Indian biological diversity. So we can let's start from the beginning, that the Biological Diversity Act of 2002 aims to conserve biological diversity, and it's also aimed to promote the sustainable use of its resources and also ensure fair sharing of the benefits that actually derive from the biological resources and related knowledge to the biological diversity. As we know, India is known for its rich biodiversity and traditional knowledge systems. So, and India is also a signatory to the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity, that actually signed on Rio de Janeiro in 1992. The convention, which actually took effect in December 1993, recognizes actually the sovereign rights of the states over the biological resources. It seeks to achieve three main objectives. The one is conserving biological diversity, another is promoting the sustainable use of the biological components, third one is ensuring that the benefits that actually arising from the use of the genetic resources are shared fairly and equitably. So this act is actually passed by the Indian parliaments, that actually aligns with the Convention on Biological Diversity goals, aiming to regulate and promote the conservation and sustainable utilization of biodiversity in India. It actually underscores the importance of equitable benefit sharing and the need to integrate these principles within India's legal framework to fulfill the international commitments. The acts actually sets forward provisions to support Indian biodiversity heritage and protect the associated traditional knowledge, thereby we can say addressing both national as well as the international responsibilities concerning biodiversity conservations and benefit sharing. The Biological Diversity Act of 2002 applies across India, and its aim is to preserve the biological diversity, ensure sustainable use and equitable sharing benefits derived from the biological resources. There are about 12 chapters, 65 sections and many subsections in the Biological Diversity Act of 2002. Let's discuss these 12 chapters one by one in the coming slides. So, the chapter 1 of the Biological Diversity Act actually defines the terms that actually has been used throughout the 12 chapters of Biological Diversity Acts. So, just like I have just highlighted few of them, the benefit claimers, individuals are the groups that actually conserving resources and holding knowledge on on resource use. Another term is biological diversity, variability among organisms and the ecosystems. Another term is biological resources, plants, animals and the microorganisms with a potential value. Another is commercial utilization, use of the resources for products like drugs and the cosmetics. Another term is National Biodiversity Authority, body overseeing the act's implementation. We can say the acts also define sustainable use as utilizing resources without degrading biodiversity for future generations. There are many other things that have been defined in these chapters, but I highlighted few of them. The second chapter of Biological Diversity Act actually deals with the biological resources in India, aiming to prevent the unauthorized use of the resources and associated knowledge by foreign objects or non-residents. The key provisions of that is assess restrictions. The foreign individuals, non-residents and the bodies with some kind of foreign ownerships or management needs to obtain approval from the National Biodiversity Authority to assess Indian biological resources for research, commercializations or biosurvey. Another thing that is there in the chapter second is research transfers. So, the research results that actually involves the Indian biological resources cannot be transferred to foreign bodies or non-residents without the prior approval of National Biodiversity Authority. We can say these restrictions does not actually apply to the publication of the research that are actually in the seminars or the journals if these certain guidelines have been fulfilled. The first is the collaborative research. Projects between the Indian institutions and the foreign bodies may bypass certain restrictions if they conform to government policies and receive central government approvals. And if certain agreements are in place, we can say before this enforcement of these acts are actually cancelled if they actually varying with the current guidelines and the current regulations. Another is we can say intellectual Another is intellectual property rights. National Biodiversity Authority actually approval is required before applying for any patents on inventions based on the Indian biological resources. And approval may also include benefit sharing fees or royalties, and certain exemptions are made for the plant variety protections. Another is we can say state level approval. Indian citizens and the entities must notify the we can say state biodiversity boards before using any biological resources for the commercial purposes, except we can say for the local communities, traditional healers and the cultivators who rely on the indigenous practices. Another we can say chapter third actually deals with the establishment of National Biodiversity Authority. The National Biodiversity Authority is actually established by the central government under the Biological Diversity Act of 2002 as a corporate body. It will have a perpetual association, a common seal and powers to acquire property and enter into contracts. The National Biodiversity Authority will have its head office in Chennai with provisions to establish office elsewhere in India upon central government approvals. So, let us discuss some of the composition of we can say National Biodiversity Authority. The National Biodiversity Authority will be composed of the following members: the chairpersons, and a chairperson may be an eminent individuals with experience in biodiversity conservation and sustainable resource uses. Another we can say ex officio members, representative from various governments, ministries including tribal affairs, environmental forest, agriculture research, biotechnology, ocean developments and others may be the ex officio members. Another is non-official members, specialists or we can say the scientists with expertise in the biological diversity and sustainable use and equitable benefit sharings can be the non-official members. The terms and the conditions we can say of the office for the chairperson and non-ex officio members are prescribed by the central government. Let us discuss some of the committees which are there in the National Biodiversity Authority. The National Biodiversity Authority can create committees for specialized tasks such as dealing with agrobiodiversity, we can say like biological diversity related to agriculture and the biorelatives. These committees can actually include co-opted members who can attend the meetings also and participate the discussion, but they don't have any kind of voting rights in. The committee will have a compensation for their attendance as determined by the central government. Officers and other officers and employees of the National Biodiversity Authority. The National Biodiversity Authority is actually empowered to appoint necessary officers and the employees to carry out its function effectively. The terms and the conditions of the services of these employees are actually regulated by the National Biodiversity Authority with specific rules and the regulations. So, what are the functions of we can say the chapter 3 deals with the functions and the powers of the National Biodiversity Authority. The National Biodiversity Authority we can say play a central role in regulating, managing and conserving biological resources and biodiversity in India. Its functions and powers are outlined in Biological Diversity Act of 2002. We will discuss some of them. Under the Biological Diversity Act, we can say the National Biodiversity Authority is tasked with regulating activities that are actually related to the biological resources. These includes approval for the activities. The National Biodiversity Authority is responsible for granting approvals for certain activities that are actually outlined in the Biological Diversity Act under Section 3, 4 and 6 of this Act. These sections, we can say, covers access to biological resources, research, commercial use and transfer of the knowledge associated with such resources. And National Biodiversity Authority is also authorized to issue guidelines for assessing biological resources and ensuring fair and equitable benefit sharing among the stakeholders. This includes the, we can say, development of new framework to ensure the sustainable use of these resources and also to safeguard the interest of the communities that have traditionally conserved. Chapter 4 also deals the advisory role of the National Biodiversity Authority. The National Biodiversity Authority also plays a significant advisory role to both to the central as well as the state governments on various matters that actually are related to the biodiversity and sustainable use of the biological resources. And certain advice, the National Biodiversity Authority also advise the central governments on the matters related to the conservation of the biodiversity, the sustainable use of its components, and equitable sharing of the benefits that actually derive from the use of the biological resources. These guidance is crucial, we can say, in shaping national policies and strategies related to the biodiversity conservation and sustainable resource management. This National Biodiversity Authority also advised to the state government on selecting areas of biodiversity importance to be notified as heritage sites. So these areas are actually significant for conservations, as well as we can say National Biodiversity Authority actually helps ensure that the proper management strategies are put in place to protect these sites of international importance. The National Biodiversity Authority also provides technical support and guidance in managing these areas to preserve the biological diversity. Chapter 4 also deals with the intellectual property rights and the biological resources. One of, we can say, critical functions of the National Biodiversity Authority is to protect Indian biological resources from being exploited through the intellectual property systems in other countries. The National Biodiversity Authority is actually authorized to oppose the intellectual property claims on behalf of the central government. The National Biodiversity Authority can take measures, we can say, to oppose the grant of intellectual property rights in foreign countries if these rights are related to the biological resources or traditional knowledge originating from the India. This is especially important, we can say, in preventing biopiracy, where we can say foreign entities seek patents or other intellectual property protection on biological resources and knowledge sourced from the India without actually recognizing the contribution of the indigenous communities or paying due benefits to these indigenous communities. Another, we can sum up this chapter 4 regarding the powers and the function of the National Biodiversity Authority. The powers and the function of this National Biodiversity Authority are critical, we can say, in framework for biodiversity conservation in India. These includes regulation of the access, regulating access to the biological resources and associated knowledge for research and commercial use, granting approvals, issues approvals for activities related to the utilization of the biological resources, also ensure that such activities are carried out in line with the Biological Diversity Act's provisions. Another is they also need to issue guidelines, developing and issuing guidelines for fair and equitable benefit sharing and ensuring that the access to the biological resources actually does not harm the environment or the indigenous communities. Another, we can say, roles, advisory roles, providing certain kind of expertise and advice to the central as well as the state government on biodiversity conservation, heritage site management and sustainable resource use. Another is, we can say, protection against biopiracy, taking measures to prevent foreign exploitations of Indian biological resources by actually opposing the granting of intellectual property rights outside India related to the Indian resources and the knowledge. Let's discuss this what fourth, we can say certain general functions have also been defined, performing all uh, other activities that are actually necessary to effectively implement the Biological Diversity Acts, which include ensuring the sustainable management of the biological resources and their fair use. Through these functions and the powers, we can say the National Biodiversity Authority play a pivotal role in protecting Indians' rich biodiversity and also ensure that the benefit that actually derived from its use and are shared equitably, and safeguarding the countries from unauthorized exploitation of its biological resources. Under, we can say, chapter 5 of the Biological Diversity Acts, individuals or the bodies seeking to assess biological resources from India for research, commercial use or bioutilizations may first apply to the National Biodiversity Authority. This applications process includes submitting certain kind of the prescribed forms and the fees to the National Biodiversity Authority. Additionally, we can say anyone seeking to apply for the intellectual property rights or intellectual property protections such as patents related to the biological resources must also seek approval from the National Biodiversity Authority. The National Biodiversity Authority then reviews the applications and consulting experts, committees if necessary, and then grants approval subject to the certain terms and the conditions that actually laid down in the Biological Diversity Act. The National Biodiversity Authority has also authority, we can say, to reject applications, but must provide an opportunity for the applicant to be heard before actually doing or rejecting his or her applications. So public notice will also be issued or will be given for each approval actually granted. Then the chapter 5 also talk about transfer of the biological resources. Once approval is granted under section 19, the transfer of the biological resources, or we can say associated knowledge, can only be occur with the, we can say, National Biodiversity Act permissions. Applicant must submit a request for the approval to transfer these resources, which is subject to the same review and the approval process as initiated in the first applications. So National Biodiversity Authority can impose certain terms and the conditions and the royalties on transfers and must provide public notice for each of the, we can say, granted approval. Another, we can say, chapter 5 also talk about equitable benefit sharings. We can say in granting approvals, the National Biodiversity Authority also ensure that the terms includes in the equitable sharing of the benefits that actually arise from the use of the biological resources. These includes joint ownerships of the intellectual property, technology transfers, research collaborations, or the establishment of, we can say, production units in areas that actually benefiting the local communities. Other measures that National Biodiversity Authority can take is such as ventures, capital funds, or monetary compensation may also be applied. So we can say any financial compensation for benefit sharing may be directed to the National Biodiversity Funds, or we can say directly to the individuals or organizations involved as per agreements. So as this chapter 6 actually talks about, we can say, establishment of state biodiversity boards. Under chapter 6, we can say the Biological Diversity Act, each state's government is required to establish a state biodiversity board to oversee the biodiversity matters within its jurisdictions. The state government, through a notification, will formally establish the board and its functions that will align with the provision of the acts. However, we can say for union territories, the National Biodiversity Authority assumes the role of the state biodiversity boards. The National Biodiversity Authority may delegate its power to specific individuals or the groups within the union territories. What is the composition of the state biodiversity boards? The state biodiversity board is a body corporate with permanent successions and a common seals. It is empowered to acquire and dispose of the property and enter into contracts. The board will consist of a chairperson, just like National Biodiversity Authority, with expertise in the biodiversity conservation and equitable sharing of the benefits. And this can be up to 5 ex officio members will be there from various state governments departments, and up to 5 experts members with specialized knowledge in the biodiversity conservation and sustainable use. And the board will operate from the head office designated by the state government. What are the functions of the State Biodiversity Board? The primary function of the State Biodiversity Board includes advising the state government on conservation, sustainable use, and equitable sharing of the biological resources, and also advise the state government on regulating activities that actually related to the commercial utilization, biosurvey, and bioutilization of the biological resources. And it also advise, or we can say this function is performing other duties as prescribed by the state governments, or we can say necessary for the implementation of the Biological Diversity Act of 2002. And this chapter 6 also talk about prior intimation and the regulation of the activities. Citizen or any organization that actually going to plan any activities under section 7 must submit a proper intimation to the State Biodiversity Board. The board may, after consulting the local bodies and conducting inquiries, prohibit or restrict activities deemed are found harmful to the biodiversity conservation. So these intimations details are confidential and will not be disclosed to the unauthorized persons as per the provision of the National Biodiversity Act of 2002. With this, we end today's lectures, and in the next lectures we actually we will discuss the remaining 6 chapters of the Biological Diversity Acts. Thank you, dear students. Thank you very much.